All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. As regular viewers and subscribers know, in addition to currently living in New England, I have a history out in Chicago. Some of the best people I know are from that city. Some of the best music I've ever heard is from that city. So I'm always jumping at opportunities to spotlight that area and some of the music from it. I'm joined by three-fourths of a band that I was recently introduced to and instantly fell in love with. So I'm very happy to be able to expose people to them in a wider sense through this channel. It's my pleasure to welcome, as I said, three-fourths of Comasoft. Gentlemen, thank you very much for
Well,
joining me.
hey everyone.
And we have
right.
Tia Ramirez, Tomas, and Christopher joining me today. There's a second Christopher who may or may not join us. We'll see how it goes, but in the meantime, we'll hit the ground running. From what I understand, the band's been around for about 20 years now, or at least 20 years as a group that has been releasing music. The band has just recently, in April, released an EP called Gather at the End, which was actually my first introduction to you, thanks to our mutual friend David Schock sending me some music. And I'm really glad he did because with what I do here and through my website, I get a lot of music sent to me. To be honest, most of it doesn't last past the first half of the first song because if it doesn't hit me, there's gonna be 300 other things, you know. But your EP has been on repeat pretty much since I got it. Really loving the sound, which I would describe to the viewer. Um, if you're of my generation, of my age group, you know, names like Visage, Human League, that will mean something to you. Um, I also hear little shades of the Mission in there. Um, the Cure, and when I say the Cure, I mean specifically the 17 Seconds era.
Awesome.
Should ring some bells for some people as well. And obviously, it's a unique spin that you put on that sound in general as well. So it's definitely um, very much indicative of your originality, sprinkled with some of these influences. So if you are a fan of that list of bands I just mentioned, you need to check this group out. So first of all, congratulations on the new EP. And I figure we'll kind of start with some general history. I know. This EP follows an album you'd put out in 2023.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, there had been a few years between the 2023 album and your previous release, about 7, 8 years.
Right.
So kind of bring me up to speed on how that went, you know, what accounted for that time gap and to the point where now you're producing music again on a more consistent basis.
Sure. Yeah. I think, so I was the original starter of the band. Tomas is the original drummer. We had a bunch of years back in the, I guess, like late MySpace era, that we played a lot, did as much, played as much as we could. And at about 2016, I think it was like sort of people's lives just got more busy and it just became more difficult to do that. The van we had kind of broke down, and it was just life just kind of happened. Forward a bunch of years. Chris Lee and I started hanging out a lot more. I mean, we had known each other for years, but started hanging out a lot more. And he's a music producer in his own right. He's got all different projects that he records for. And together with two of our other friends, we had made a connection with a company in Los Angeles to do some like licensing.
Mhm.
And so we're like, we should just send everything we have. So we kind of sent him the very first package, and it had some songs from different projects, and there was a few Coma songs in there. And he chose he wanted a couple of the tracks. And so we're like, oh man, we need to like do something with these. We have to like release them so they can have the ISRC code on them. And so it sort of pushed us into releasing Finis Tempora, which was the 2023 four-song EP.
Mhm.
And it was simply because of that. It was just because we had to have codes on them. So we decided to release, and that kind of kicked off. All of our friends and some of our old fans were just like, "Oh, you're making music again," and and yeah, that was it. So within that, like we started brainstorming. Chris and I are like trying to focus in on what we really enjoyed on that EP and what the sound we were kind of going for. There's a song on that EP called Worship that sort of to me sort of defined the what we wanted to try to do. And so Chris and I had spent a lot of time like almost what you were saying in the intro, just listening to bands, listening to snare drums from bands from 1983, like stuff like that, like to try to like kind of craft some of the sounds that we enjoyed. Um, and for me, like being a kind of a keyboard nerd, I knew what sort of synthesizer sounds I wanted. I happened to have some really old, analog synths, and so, and then it was just kind of trying to define the right atmosphere, like how much sawtooth versus how much square wave do you want the sound to sound like. And once you figure that out, you can kind of get the, a really neat atmosphere. So I think that the record we just did probably is the most cohesive, like from front to back. It sounds, pretty solid. And that's yeah, that's kind of like where we want to go.
Fantastic. And in terms of this being an EP, one thing I've certainly noticed, I'd say within the last 5 years at least, and this isn't genre specific, but there are a lot more EPs than full-length releases out there.
Hmm.
And there are a lot more EPs than singles, which will be like a track in a remix or two tracks in a remix or something. So, the EP format has really become, from my experience, the more, predominant way people are releasing music. So, why go in that direction yourselves? And has that been something you've seen as well, where just the packaging of music has changed to where that becomes the more preferred format at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people just don't have the attention span anymore, right? So like rather than try to do these amazing long records that we've all done, let's just make things and get them at them as fast as possible. Um, I think that attributes to some of it. And
Yeah.
like, have you noticed this trend also where people release a single and then they release another single and that comes along with the previous one and then they release another single and that comes with all three until they get to the EP? Just kind of gaming Spotify and stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know, music's weird. Publishing music's weird at this point. So I think that these like short little chunks of things getting in front of people is better. That's kind of where my head's at. But I'm open to hear you guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I think especially because we're all in other projects. I mean, Chris is probably in the most. We tend to create lots of demo stuff, and then if you can, after a while, kind of sit in a room together and listen to some of the demos, you can be like, man, these cluster together really nicely.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm 100% on board with just doing the EP process like that. I mean, it feels like a nice little package of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And here's where the band's been at. Here's where our mind is. Um, and then move on to the next one, see what's going to happen. I mean, we're currently like demoing stuff for the next one right now. So, like I think it's a good time and format for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell bands sometimes it's much better to have someone listen to a great 5 song EP 3 times than a mediocre full-length 15-track album once.
Right.
It kind of helps you zero in on the strongest material, and I would say every song is great on this new EP. And, Chris, I'm glad you're joining us because before we started recording, I was telling the other fellas how much I love your guitar work on this,
Oh,
really.
thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Um, it's yeah, I really encourage people to listen to it because I said, there's some common influences and some light bulbs that will go off in people's heads with some of the acts I've mentioned. But I think what really separates the EP and by extension the band is you're all really great players and you know how to write a song.
So it's
It's
funny you say that because like my history as a guitar player has been like, I don't know, noodly and shreddy, right?
mm,
So like when I joined with Jay doing this stuff, I had to kind of learn how to not do that at all and like truly understand the style and like back off and like kind of hang out and vibe a little bit and stuff.
mm. So w when did you come on board with the group?
Jay and I've been writing songs for, I don't know, 5 years probably, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know when we started immediately focusing on Comasoft,
Mm.
maybe eight. But
Yeah, I think that like the of all of our friends that are singers, I'm the drummer. I'm really a drummer, but I happen to be a singer. And so when I demo my parts, they sound sort of like the way that I sound. I'm not like I don't have a huge range. I sing pretty high, but I tend to have the same, rhythmic cadence because I'm a drummer. And so when we were demoing stuff, they just naturally sounded like these are probably Comasoft tracks. We finished some songs that are like this is definitely not a Comasoft song that are sort of sitting in our 1 billion terabyte Dropbox folders.
I'm
But
sure
yeah,
Joel's familiar.
yeah, yeah, that's how it happened. I think in particular with the with Gather at the End, the first track called Firebomb, that little intro guitar, it's played really high on the neck and it's not a lot of notes. And I think that little piece of the first like 35 seconds of that, Chris and I probably did in like 2022. It was before Finnis record. And it just wasn't used. And then after Finnis was out, and I was like, starting to do some soul searching on the next EP, I heard that little piece, and I texted Chris, and I was like, "This is the next song we got to do. We have to finish this." And at that time, it was just like a little tiny chunk, but that little guitar part was really what sold it, and I think that kind of sent us off on the path that we went on.
Mm.
Joel,
Excellent.
right, let me ask you a question. Are you still producing music and stuff?
Me?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I perform music.
Okay.
I don't really do production. I'm kind of a drummer, and I know what sounds good. Hopefully, and I know how to
You're in the
make work.
band Pig Face, right?
Yeah, yeah. One of the 15,000 drummers in Pigface. You know, I'm not from Chicago, but I've been there quite often. And the joke is, the worst pickup line in Chicago is I play drums in Pigface because it's very unimpressive out there. In
Yeah.
New England, where I live now, my chances are a bit better. But out in Chicago, it wouldn't quite work well for me. But I have an ear for things, but I've never sat down and learned the technical ins and outs of production.
Sure.
I work with people who are infinitely more together in that department. I just bark orders and, terribly phrased directions, and they somehow filter that into something coherent. So
Love that.
fortunately, I have the right people. Um, but you'd mentioned, there are some things that obviously work as Comasoft songs and other things that work elsewhere. Let's talk about the elsewhere for a minute. What are some other projects you do musically, of which Comasoft is part?
Um, there's a handful of stuff. Like Jay and I teeter on 4 or 5 different projects randomly at any given time. Um, we have like a metalcore project that we've been working on with my friend Crew that Jay's like been doing drums with. We Our friend group also has this thing called Audio Dream, which is like how would you explain? It's like radio, modern Radiohead, but less
Yeah, like
experimental,
kind of,
I
kind of
guess.
Sigur Rós. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do a bunch of random other stuff. We used to equate it to like if you had a dartboard and there was like each thing was like genres.
Hmm.
Throw a dart at the dartboard, and you're like, okay, we're doing that today. Call the singer that belongs on that one.
Yeah, so that's really cool. It's like a collective of our friends from Chicago and in different bands. That Audio Dream band, like I played drums with them for a long time. The singer Anthony used to be in a band called Makeshift Prodigy. He's just a fantastic songwriter. So and him and Chris have put together a ton of new songs. So yeah, whatever kind of once we start playing little parts, the session might veer off into something being like, who we need here? Let's call this guy to come in and do that stuff. So it's really fun. I mean, it's all sort of centered around Chris's studio there that he's sitting in. And like we release stuff under Bloom. It's called like Bloom Studio, spelled oddly. But if you find that on Spotify, there's songs that are with me singing on there. There's songs with Anthony from Audio Dream on there, like all kinds of stuff. So that's sort of our release of all different kinds of tracks that aren't necessarily in Coma.
That's really cool and very indicative of Chicago. The idea, you said the word collective, and that
Hmm.
word comes up a lot when I talk to different Chicago friends. That the one joke I have is if you meet someone in Chicago, it begins with hello, how are you? And then within 20 minutes is you're cool, let's do something. There's that great collaborative spirit of that city. Obviously that's dated back to, at the very least, the Wax Trax days, where everybody was kind of bouncing into other people's sessions and
Oh yeah.
which of course lends itself to Pigface and a lot of the other collaborations that seem to come from that city. So I think, that's very much an element of Chicago, but I am curious because, you and Tomas have been at this at least 20 years with Comasoft.
Yep.
And that's a long time to be in a scene in a particular city. Um, not only just historically in terms of society have things changed in 20 years, but I'm sure a lot of other things, scene specific, have as well. So how would you say Chicago as a scene and a community perhaps evolved since the time this project first began 2 decades ago?
Man, that's a really interesting question. I think, in our early years, we were there was a lot of bands that were doing really well in the same sort of genre. Like it wasn't necessarily got it was like a little more emo-y, like bands like Kill Hannah and Medina Lake. And we would play with those bands and it just worked out fantastically for us. The people that would come to see them would all of a sudden start showing up at all our shows. So it was a real good cross-contamination, I would call it, cross-pollination, whichever. We're now that we're I mean our sound's a little different. We're not playing quite as fast and a little more like darker sounding. But goth I think in general is having a sort of a rebirth. Like there seems to be I remember a few years ago going to see Twin Tribes. My wife's like a huge fan of goth music. So we went to go see Twin Tribes and it was a giant room. Like I expected it to be something like, double door size or a couple hundred and it was like eight or 900 room and it was filled and I was like holy cow, like this is really happening. And it's not just them, there's tons of bands like Actors and just are pulling in huge crowds. I think that's really awesome for that music that has a really distinct sound. Like I love that sort of early 80s kind of where the snares are a little thicker and darker. They just don't sound so snappy. Uh but that and like there's tons of reverb on the guitars and everything like that. Like it just sounds really awesome. So I think that has been pulling in really well in Chicago. The shows here are really huge that people go out to. So it's cool.
That's great. That's great. Especially now, considering what we went through this, the start of this decade, to see things blossoming again. And I've seen that elsewhere. Certainly in New England where I am too, there's a very healthy scene, not just for what we'll say, goth industrial, but
Yep.
a lot of punk and punk, hard rock, hardcore. It seems like everything has just gone boom, which is great because there's a lot of new opportunities. In addition to the scene obviously being very healthy in Chicago and otherwise, there are spots all over the country where things are going on. How travel intensive are your plans right now as far as bringing the band on the road to other spots?
I think it really depends on like if in the old days we would play anywhere that would have us and it was like it was just maybe easier on all of our lives. And I think now like we want to be a little more curated and make sure that it's right for us financially and right for everyone's lives. But I've fielded all kinds of different things. Open to going wherever we need to go. We just gotta be smarter about it logistically.
Yeah,
We're
huge,
not
yeah.
carrying around as much stuff as we used to. So
Not carrying around as much stuff, and there's like a bigger production, right? Like, let's make sure that every show is like gonna really touch people, kind of.
I don't know
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
talking about. I still got a huge drum set.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the only thing. Just bringing his drum
And
Like,
set.
nobody's helping me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can see it right there right behind him. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta start just playing with like a KD7 inverse beater and like a one hi-hat
We'll just,
and a
we'll
snare.
just put you in the track, and you can just hang out and like.
Yeah, just a cymbal.
Oh, you mentioned, not getting help loading out as a drummer. Has that ever happened? I've
So
been
yeah,
doing it, almost 40 years. I don't remember many people helping me.
The other Chris helps, and Jay will help too. But
Yeah, because I'm a drummer. I know how much I know what it feels like. But you still got to be
I
listening.
try to just show up a couple minutes late and leave
yeah.
early.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
running jokes about this one and his lack of help.
Yeah.
He's got the lead singer syndrome, not Jay. I'll
Right.
put that on the track.
That's funny. That's
Well,
totally.
as far as well, despite certain band members showing up late, apparently, which I think every band's got at least one of those.
Yeah.
This lineup obviously works well, and I know, half the band isn't original, half the band is. Tomas, you being around since, day one, what do you think makes this lineup work as well as it does?
Well, I would say there's a lot of passion, and they're bringing other elements of our live sound. Not to like say anything negative about the other two guys. We love them dearly and whatnot, and they do contribute, I would say, Jay, right?
Oh yeah,
Still
for
to
sure.
this day, which is really cool. So it's kind of cohesive with even past members. But there's just something about this lineup that brings it one notch higher. Mostly Chris on his guitar and whatnot. It's more upfront, I would say, in the sound, and same thing with the drums, maybe, and then really just keyboards in the track, which is great. So it's really organic sounding rather than probably way back in the day it was more electronic than anything else. But we do evolve, right? And that's a good thing. And it's fun when we do practice. There's
Yeah,
another dig.
it's kind of cool. These newer songs have like a little more, like you were mentioning, the Curie kind of stuff, and like that lends itself to a more like organic show, I guess, than like all track based kind of like synthesizers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Both Chris's are bass players and guitar players, like they play both. So there's both of them playing guitar and bass on the record, depending on who happened to be in the room or who's doing the part. There's actually even a little bit of me playing guitar in there, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
And
Yeah,
I'd say
yeah.
that probably leads to a lot of it too, because Jay's a drummer. He pushes me to be better at drums, and then I'll kind of do stuff and say I have more feeling than Jay because he's really technical. But
yeah,
it's great with the guitarists and the basses because they can switch off and push each other. Then when I can't do one of Jay's crazy drum parts, he'll sit down and show me, and then I'll just walk away and leave. And then he'll send me a little video, and then I'll practice. And I'm like, all right, got
yeah.
it. And now I'm gonna throw a little feeling into it.
Let me ask you this, Joel. What was your favorite track from that EP? Did you have one or that like kind of stuck a little bit?
Oh man, that's really tough. That's really tough. And I hate to give you the useless answer of they're all great, but they are. But let me pull it up again. Let me get the track listing up here so I can give you a more reasonable answer.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious because I know which ones I like, but that doesn't matter really to
We all kind of have our favorites.
Yeah, yeah, everybody has their
Yeah.
favorites. And like even with the EP before it finished, like right away I knew that the
Yeah.
song Worship was like where I wanted to gravitate
There's a
towards.
song that we
And
didn't
I
get on that record that Joel would probably really like, that really like nasty synthy one.
the one that's called Slow Glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was wild. That was a wild track. Uh,
I
just
would
just
say,
odd.
if I were to, give you one answer and, have a track, I would play for someone else. Like, this is a band to check out. I would say Numbing.
Oh,
Okay.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
Jay's favorite song.
you want to know why it's called numbing with the parentheses per chance? Because that's a pretty funny story. Look at this tattooed on his
Yeah.
on his hand.
So
Uh,
like we
when we make tracks, like we never know what they're going to be called. So like on our full like our like I do a lot of stuff here in my studio. We don't know what it's going to be, so you just have to like either make up some sort of word or instead of so they're not just all like 05, 26, 22.
Right.
So like I would just make up words and then like later on with the full intention that the song would change to whatever the vocal hook is or something and Chris and then our other buddy Anthony that we spoke of earlier, like in our text message chain, he had sent me this like video of this. It was like a viral video of this kid reading like his teacher had graded his paper. He had written a college paper about Mario Brothers, and like he was just cracking up as he was reading because the teacher was not impressed with his work.
It's
And
terrible. It's
yeah, and he used the word perchance. He's and he just was cracking up. And so I had not heard that word being used in a while. It seems kind of arcane. So then we kept using it with each other. Like perchance you guys gonna come over and drink some beers tonight? And for some reason that particular song, the folder was called Perchance. So we called it that for a long time. And then when I was like, hey, the song is gonna be called Numbing, the rest of the band just revolted. They're like, it's absolutely not going to be called Numbing. The song's called Perchance. They still call it Perchance.
Yeah.
When I make the
Set list.
like our set list for live sheets, they'll
Well, no,
cross.
the best part is like I was like, it doesn't get released unless we call it for chance. And he's like, no, we can't do that. And I was like, if I get it tattooed on me before the record's out, you have to call it that. And he was like, you won't do that. So I got it tattooed.
Yeah.
Well, in your defense, perchance is a very dark and gothy word.
Right?
Oh, yeah,
You
I like
It
that.
sounds cool.
Yeah. So,
perchance, shall we go to the castle?
yeah. Yeah. We're
That's
actually working on Chris and I do a lot of like video stuff like that. I do kind of a little bit for in my, day job sort of thing. So we're gonna shoot a video for that particular track. We're just sort of doing it on our own, like zero budget kind of thing. So it's taking a while, but yeah, well, we thought that will give a new another breath of life into it down the road.
yeah, absolutely. It's a killer track, as they all are.
Thanks.
And I'm not just throwing accolades your way for the sake of it. If I wouldn't repeat myself this often if I didn't care so much about the material.
I
That's
appreciate
cool.
that.
Appreciate
We
that.
we actually put out the word to our friends right after the record came out to do some remix stuff, and we have I'm looking at it right now, two remixes of that song. By we got one from Cut Rate Box and one from Stephen Olaf, and then a couple of our friends had sent some. So like when we get about five or six, Jim Marcus said he wanted to do one. So whenever we get to a certain amount, we'll do a little remix of At the Gates, gather at the end. I mean, and put those all those songs on there.
I was gonna say we're getting metal as hell, huh?
Yeah, right.
Excellent. And I know this video will be out before then, but I did want to mention that on the 11th of July, you're out in Columbus, Ohio, playing with the Leather Strip,
Yeah.
which I'm sure is going to be a fantastic show. So, where do you see your travels going over the next few months? And do you hit, spots like the East Coast and elsewhere?
Yeah, well, we submitted for some a festival in New Orleans, so that would be really cool if we get on that. We've got asked recently for I think what was it, Minneapolis, right? Right.
Yeah.
But we haven't confirmed it. So yeah, I don't know. I lean a little bit on Dave. Like he knows my weaknesses and my strengths, and Dave Schock is a master at all the things that I'm not. And so I kind of let him lead the way a little. He's been so gracious, like of just being like, hey, let me help you guys out.
He just really likes it and likes
Yeah.
you. So I think like
Yeah.
that helps a lot.
Yeah, and he knows everyone. I kind of like let him have the reign on that, and he'll send over pitches when he thinks that they're right for us and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean my ears are always open. My inbox is always open, but yeah, I let Dave do a lot of that work.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll certainly keep my eyes and ears open. I'm sure, Dave will let me know what happens in the future because if you do end up coming closer to home, I will absolutely, come out to see.
Where do you live?
I'm in New Hampshire at the moment.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, Boston is the most reasonable spot
Mhm.
for
Sure.
things,
Yeah.
little pockets and things. So there's always opportunities. And I'm trying to get to Chicago later this year. I try to I was getting out there fairly regularly before the pandemic. It's taking me a bit of time to get my travel traction going again, but hopefully in the years to come, I'll be getting out more frequently. So hopefully there'll be chances. I'd love to see the shows. As I'm listening to the EP, I'm thinking this is going to be amazing live. This is going to really work live. So
Yeah, it did. But we invested a little bit of money in in like a light rig that isn't overbearing to carry around, like in the old days when everything was super heavy. So we can like get it up pretty quickly, and it really like speaks to the atmosphere of the music. There's lots of parts that are just brooding sounding and have like just the lights that sort of match that. So when we tested it at our last show, everyone was like, "That's exactly what you should be doing." So it worked out really nicely. So yeah, I appreciate that. We try to make the live show a level up from listening to the EP.
Yeah, one of my favorite comments from that was like, this is the first time I've ever seen Cobra Lounge actually feel like a club. And I was like, okay, nice.
Cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I hope the show coming up with Weather Strip is fantastic. I'm sure it will be. And the EP is definitely fantastic. So I will include all links in the video description for people who are new to what you're doing to check out the new EP, Gather at the End, as well as social media links. So I really encourage people watching this to give this band a listen. If you're anything like me and you like some of the groups I've mentioned in the beginning, this will immediately speak to you. And obviously this is a band that's existing in the here and now, trying to make things happen. So, always support if you're out in Chicago, always support your local bands, your indie bands, and make sure that they feel the love and stay part of this thing. So I would definitely encourage people to check you all out. And my door is always open in the future as things come out. Please keep me posted. And I hope this is the first of many conversations we'll have.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.